To today's edition of AM Minnesota. Faribault's Police Chief Andy Bohlen is in studio today. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Gordy.
Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me over.
I appreciate it very much. This is Police Week. That's why I thought it'd be kind of cool to have you on the air, and I see you do have a black band around your badge.
Yep, well, law enforcement across the state and across the nation in recognition of Police Week and Peace Officer Memorial Day, which was on May 15th. It's past us already, but we were through this week. We wore the band across our badge to recognize our fallen brothers and sisters in law enforcement.
And there's been a few here in Faribault, but it's been many years, right?
Many years. I told the sheriff too I'd also recognize Rice County as well, but we've had 5 at least in Rice County and Faribault, but thankfully Faribault, it's been a long time. We lost 3 officers back in the 1800s. Louis Jochum, Henry Kaepernick, and David Shipley, and that was between the years of 1876 and 1895. So I hope as my career progresses with the good folks I work with, that we never have to deal with something like that. The officers back in the 1800s, interestingly enough, we lost 1 to rabies, we lost 1 to an infected bullet wound, and then we lost 1 to a friendly fire situation. Believe it or not, the Jesse James Younger bank robbery in Northfield. We were housing a suspect down here at Faribault, and a Faribault officer was kind of standing guard and was concerned that somebody would try to break one of these bank robbers out. And when somebody came through the dark, the officer fired, and it was his Faribault officer that was relieving him for his shift.
No.
So it was a tragedy back in the 1800s. So. And then, of course, Rice County's lost Terry Hansen in 1994 and John Liebenstein in 1996. So,
yeah. In fact, you were telling me yesterday you were on that pursuit.
Yeah, I was in 1996 with another agency. I was on that pursuit where we chased a subject down 35, and then it tragically ended up taking John's life close to his family farm.
Just senseless.
Terrible tragedy. So, anytime unfortunately, I'm in my 27th year. I've been to dozens of law enforcement officer funerals, and they're all terrible.
Yeah. And there have been, just the last few months, there have been a lot of pursuits in our area.
Yeah, pursuits always scare, they scare law enforcement. They certainly scare chiefs and sheriffs because, there's always the unknown, and, we have to always balance the need to catch the bad guy and hold them accountable and get them taken into custody so they don't continue to commit crimes. But yet, we always got to balance public safety. If we've, the last thing you want to do is have somebody be chased and they end up taking an innocent life, or a bystander, or another motorist that's on the roadway. And so, I'm pretty proud of our men and women at Faribault PD because we've been involved in several pursuits where our people just say, no, we're canceling, we're stopping it because we either know who the bad guy is, the balancing the need for apprehension versus the threat to public safety, the time of day, where they're at, who's potentially going to get hurt, and we just walk away, charge a by complaint later. Try to use good police work and pin these people down later and kind of pick them off covertly so we don't end up in another pursuit.
Yeah, I think that Liebenstein tragedy really made law enforcement in our state relook at the whole pursuit situation at the time. I seem to recall a lot of people talking about that.
Yeah, that was, I was on that pursuit. That guy involved in the pursuit, Chambers, he had hit another vehicle. I think he even injured people in the South Metro. And, but if you know who the person is, our basic philosophy is now charge them later. Short of somebody who's bent on committing deadly force. If you've got a bank robber who's shot people and you're in a pursuit, you kind of have an obligation to try to stop that person, especially if you're concerned they're going to hurt others in the public. But if you know who somebody is and they're just fleeing because of a warrant, or they don't have a driver's license, or even if they're intoxicated, at some point, law enforcement balances the need to chase them. Sometimes when you back off the gas pedal and let them go and try to charge them later by complaint. One of the best tools that we've got in law enforcement is the State Patrol helicopter. So anytime we get something going, we try to get the bird in the air, and once they can pick them up, then we can back off of them, let them go, and when they land somewhere on their lily pad, then we'll scoop in and surround them and take them into custody without having to get another pursuit.
I know the sheriff and a couple of his deputies did do a shift up at the police memorial. Anyone from the Faribault Police Department involved?
I believe we had one up there, but I'd have to check. They do it every year. They stand guard on the 15th, and in honor, they stand on all 4 sides of the memorial. I've done it in the past, with our black bands, and it's a somber thing, but it's a very great honor to be standing at the memorial.
Yeah. We're going to visit more with the chief. Body camera legislation was passed this week at the state legislature. We'll touch on that. If you have any questions, text them to us at 507-838-5233.
Soybeans, corn,
He's out of the building.
I'm sorry.
He is out of the building somewhere.
An update. Stein's Genuity.
Clears officers, chiefs that I know that have had programs in place for quite a while. The majority of the complaints that come in when they find out, well, the cop had a body camera on, well, okay, that's not really what happened. And you review the footage and the complaint doesn't exist anymore. So, I mean, I think it keeps our cops, again, always maintaining professionalism. It's not a magic bullet, though. I mean, they're not pointing every direction. There are things that come at officers. There are dynamic situations that are maybe not in the camera field of view. So it's not the magic bullet, but it's certainly a tool that I think most law enforcement embraces. I would like to see us eventually get them. There's something that keeps going in my budget, but there's still a lot of things, too. You got to be fiscally smart, too. One of the body cam issues is storage. If you've got, I mean, our department is not a small department. You know, we've got 33 sworn now, and if you put body cams on all of our marked patrol units and our officers, and you have criteria when they turn them on and off, there's a lot of storage there for video. How long do you retain that video storage? The bill that just passed shows that if there's significant bodily harm, it's certainly something that would be released to the public, and it's also footage in public places can be released. And you know, kind of the reason behind that is, I mean, officers go to a large, diverse group of calls. So if I go to a violent domestic and there's a person there that's been assaulted and they're half naked, I don't really think that's footage that needs to be released to the media.
Right.
You got to be sensitive to the victims that we deal with, and some of the things that we deal with, you know, are ugly in nature. So you know, I think there's a good common sense ground with this, and I'm certainly supportive of the bill. I'd like to see us get them. I think, obviously, before I retire, I think we're going to see everybody in law enforcement is going to have one. You know, you come out of the training FTO period, or as soon as you put the uniform on, whether it's brown, blue, or maroon, and you're going to be handed a body cam. I think that's going to happen.
And so all 33 of your officers aren't on duty at the same time. Can you share these, or do you have to each have your own?
No,
body cam?
we've talked about different ways to set it up. I mean, I've still got to get it through our budget. We've got to figure out storage for this stuff. It might be something that only our marked units we start off with, and they're the ones that use it. But you know, again, I've still got to get it through our budgeting process. But I think it's a good program. I think a lot of chiefs and sheriffs are probably waiting to see if the feds are going to have a big pile of federal funded money. I mean, obviously, much of this conversation was driven from the Ferguson shooting in 2014. You look across the nation, and there's been a lot of stories of mistrust of the law enforcement, and you know, that's kind of been a push to the body cam. So, and I think most responsible law enforcement leaders are looking at this going, yeah, it's a good thing. Our cops should have body cams. We just got to figure out how to implement a program so it doesn't kill us in data retention. And believe it or not, there are people that come into law enforcement agencies and say, well, I want every call and report public data between this time and this time. Well, that could take hundreds of staff hours to create that stuff. And some of that stuff you don't even get paid for it, so it doesn't even pay for your staff time. So if you've got to burn DVDs of body cam video and everything was public, you could potentially have a request for data for a number of officers for a large time period that could take, you know, hundreds and hundreds of hours of staff time to make that data request. And of course, you can't deny public data. So that's kind of some of the balancing with that.
I'm sure you've looked into some of the costs associated with this. Is this a really expensive adventure?
No, I mean, we're looking at, right now we've got cameras in our squad cars, and they run about just over $5,000. We're looking at systems that maybe have the camera, the body cam that connects and maybe uploads with the squad camera. So you're not talking a lot about the technology. You might be talking, you know, between the squad cam and the body cam, you know, maybe between $5,000 and $6,000. So even if you
storage.
Yeah, but the storage is the big one. Do you pay a fee to store everything in a cloud-based storage where you can keep it for longer? Different departments, we've got to look at a policy that we want to embrace if we move towards this technology, but different departments have different retention rates. I mean, some departments might say they want to keep body cam information for a year. Well, if you've got to keep body cam video for a year, that's a pretty big storage. So do you keep it on a local server? Do you pay a service to keep it? So those are costs we've really got to nail down so we're not surprised.
The bill doesn't outline that, though. It doesn't specify how long you keep stuff. I thought
No,
that
I think the data retention, some of this stuff, I don't know if they've talked specifically about complaints on officers in the bill. I haven't read the final bill. But ultimately, some of the retention stuff is based on department policy and what you're keeping. Some agencies may keep data longer. I think I've recalled one metro agency said they keep their information and their body cam stuff for up to a year.
What are you thinking locally?
Well, I certainly think we need to keep it for a period of time that if people do have a complaint, they have an opportunity to come in and request the video if they're the subject of the video and it's a public place. And I also believe that if you're the subject of the video, if you are the person who was videotaped with the officer's body cam during an incident, I certainly think you have a right to view that as well. So, but you know, there was even talk with this bill that officers have to tell people that they're videotaping them, which is nonsensical because the reality is we deal with dynamic situations. So if I turn my body cam on during a bank robbery, do I have to announce to the bank robber that I need to film you?
Yeah,
you know, I mean, so some of it was a little ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's obviously someone who has absolutely no knowledge of what you guys deal with.
Right. There's a lot of I think suspicion out there from people on body cams, and they think somehow law enforcement's I think trying to manipulate this. And the reality is, I think we're all respectful of victims. We want to make sure that stuff doesn't end up on the news that's sensitive, something that happens at someone's home. But I'm more than willing, if we ever, I hope we never do, get involved in a deadly force encounter. But if we do, and we've got body cams, I think it's better for chiefs to be involved in that. I know Burnsville was just involved in an altercation where somebody lost their life, and they've got body cam footage of that. So I know the chief very well, and he's a big proponent of body cams, and he's been in front of the state legislature several times. So there's several videos online you can look at as well that officers across the nation where body cams have kind of shown what's happened.
So he brought that on board before the state passed their policies.
Yeah, Chief Eric Easkey from Burnsville was involved in it with working with the state. He's had that program in place for quite a while, so he's kind of been one of the trendsetters. He had that even before Minneapolis implemented their program.
And you guys decided we're going to wait and see what the legislature does before we jump with both feet in the water.
I think a lot of chiefs and sheriffs were kind of waiting on that. I mean, you want a solid policy, you want to understand what you're getting. You obviously want to also be fiscally responsible too. I mean, we've got a budget, we answer to the taxpayers and the council, so you know, maybe there's some funding available for us to grab a hold of, to utilize. I mean, we're not a small agency, but we're also not Minneapolis, St. Paul. But there's a cost for storage and there's a cost for these devices. So we want to try to explore the most fiscally responsible avenue we can to purchase them.
Again, the number to text your question, if you have a question for Chief Bohlen, is 507-838-5233, 507-838-5233. What else did we want to touch on here? I don't...
Well, you know, we've got the Click It or Ticket campaign going on with TZD from May 23rd through June 5th. So I know we've already been involved in at least impaired driving waves here from April, May, and June, and had many traffic stops, a DUI, some tickets and warnings, and patrolled many, many miles. But this Click It or Ticket campaign that's going on starting May 23rd through the 5th, you know, it's a statewide campaign, but you know, we're hoping to save lives, and people are getting better at wearing their seatbelt, but you know, we still understand that in 2015, 91 unbelted motorists died in Minnesota roadways, and many of those were in greater Minnesota, so they're in areas like Rice County.
Yeah, 87% of those fatalities were in outstate Minnesota. That's incredible.
Yep, and you know, they say 40% of all motorists killed, you know, didn't have their seatbelts on, so it could have been a factor. So
you know, you would think with the metro and all the traffic there, but I think people pay a little more attention up there.
Well, I think roadways are designed different too. I mean, I came from Lakeville after being up there for almost 20 years, and Lakeville's got a lot larger geographic area, so roadways are faster. So we had more fatalities in Lakeville than we do in Faribault. Now you certainly get them in rural Rice County, and I'm not saying we haven't had them here in Faribault, but you don't deal with a number of them. But when you get faster roadways, you know, and less metro, you get the chance of more death, and obviously we want to encourage people to wear their seatbelts.
So in the years that you've been in law enforcement, Andy, what's changed the most? Has it been the technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology, I mean, we have printers in the squads now. We're actually doing away with paper tickets here. Really, really this month and next we're kind of doing away with it. So now if you get stopped, there's a little thermal printer in squad cars. You type everything in the computer, it auto-populates, it prints out the ticket on the thermal printer paper, and that's what we give as a citation. You know, DWI charging, I mean, now you can do everything electronic and submit it to the state. Records uploaded to the county attorneys and prosecutors almost immediately. So technology's come a long way. I mean, body cams I think are going to be good. The taser, I mean, we've got things out there for use of force that have come a long way, that have reduced officers having the need to go hands-on with people that want to wrestle with law enforcement. So the technology's been pretty impressive.
Yeah. And I'm assuming when you started, there weren't, I don't recall how many years you've been a police officer, Andy, but, you know, police dogs have just come within the last quarter century, right?
Yeah, I mean, I started in Austin, Minnesota. I was there for 3 years, and they were one of the first departments in the South Metro to kind of have them. So I've kind of worked with police dogs my whole career, but Faribault was lucky enough. We've had one now for 2 years, Chase, and the officer that handles them now is Mike Thule, and that's been a phenomenal tool. And what's interesting is, you know, I think there was always concern from I think city leadership and some concern of even liability. I mean, when you have a police dog, it's a tool, and it can be dangerous, and you need to make sure it's taken care of. But what's interesting is, as busy as we are as a city, that dog has yet to be sent to apprehend somebody and sink its teeth into somebody to hold on to them. Because the majority of calls where Chase and Mike are used, you know, even the announcement of "I've got a police dog," people put their hands up pretty quick when they hear that dog barking. They do not want to deal with the dog. So, and it's been a great PR tool. Chase and Mike have done a great job. Kids love him. I mean, it used to be National Night Out or Night to Night. Now is what we call it, the program. But you know, people can request certain things at their block party, and you know, you feel kind of special if they ask for the chief or the mayor or somebody else.
But they ask for the.
They always want the dog. Yeah, that's always number one. So. Dogs always went out.
Little dog got it?
No, you're pretty good, Gordy.
You have to learn how to bark there.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been great. I've been doing this is my 27th year now, so it's things have definitely changed, and I'm sure they'll continue to evolve.
Oh yeah. Andy Bohlen is the police chief here in the city of Faribault. He's our guest on AM Minnesota today. Not sure about tomorrow's program. I think Jerry was going to host the show. We'll see how that works out. On tomorrow's AM Minnesota program at 9:30. And if you have a question, 507-838-5233 is the number. John Dvorak will be stopping by, Executive Secretary of the Rice County Fair, on Tuesday next week. Next Thursday, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Jim Marthaler is a social services supervisor in Rice County. He is an opiate addiction survivor. And we're going to talk about that. That's kind of burgeoning right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an epidemic really across the nation. I mean, it seems to right now kind of start with prescription pills, and then the scary thing is we have an influx of opioids and heroin into this country that you know can be quite devastating. So
we have these parties now. I can't remember what they call them. You would know because you're more hip than I am, Andy. But I've been told that the kids had these parties where they throw all the prescription things they can find in a medicine cabinet and throw it in a bowl and put it out in the center of the, you know. And
you don't like Skittles. Yeah, you don't know what you're ingesting. So, yeah, opioid addiction is certainly a scary thing. I know we deal with it. You know, I'm part of the drug court, which has been, I think, a very successful model here in Rice County, and you know, we've also seen our first graduate from that program as well. So you want to see people get through opioid addiction. I know James does a great job, so you know, I'm sure he'll be a great guest.
Hey, I'm glad you brought that up. The drug court. Maybe you could explain to our listeners how that works.
Well, drug court, I'll even back up. There's new sentencing guidelines out there now, which are supported, you know, really by law enforcement as well. There's some things I don't think everybody got what they were necessarily asking for during the drug sentencing guidelines, but it's something that everybody kind of came to the table and agreed on, and we all agree that low-level drug users really need to be in systems like drug courts. They need to get help for their addiction. We don't want to criminalize it if we can get people cleaned up and not using. We don't want to see them in our jails and in our prisons. You know, so drug court here in Rice County has been around. We had our first graduate, Andrea Lyman. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me mentioning her name. There was a great front page article. Real proud of that young lady. She's done a phenomenal job. So we have a team that meets every week, and we have a a list of somewhere anywhere between sometimes 8 and 10 people that are going through the program, and we talk about how to keep these people on track. Probation and our coordinator of the program kind of keeps people accountable, and you know, we've had some good success so far. I'm sure there's going to be more graduations coming, and hopefully there are folks that continue to be productive and happy and not have to enter into the system or enter into something that they need more help with treatment down the road.
Now, just to clarify, you're talking about the lesser users. If you're a dealer, you want to put them away, right?
Typically our approach to that is if you're a high-level drug dealer, we're going to use the court system for that, and that's even the sentencing guidelines. They're kind of targeting some of those high-level users, ones that especially involve violence or have weapons on them. The lower-level folks, so we certainly that may be facing prison time, or we think that they can be helped. They use kind of a criminology scale to determine if they should fit for drug court, but we're still working on that progress as well, and the team's done a good job putting it together, and we want to hopefully get more people into that program.
But all dealers would be serving some prison sentence, right?
Well, I mean, we take each case by case. I mean, I think there are some exceptions where we've even looked at a drug court and went, is this person going to be beneficial? It's kind of a team consensus, and we also involve our drug task force. I mean, they know what's going on in the streets, and they know who we're dealing with too, and who can maybe benefit from this program. So it's been a good program in Rice County. So hopefully it'll continue to thrive, and will be nice if the state and the feds continue to find funding for those good programs, because we don't want to have folks end up in prison if we can help them out.
Yeah. What's your biggest challenge right now as a department?
I think, you know, probably drugs. I mean, drugs still drive crime. I mean, I think any chief or sheriff would probably tell you between, you know, 70 and 85% of our criminal activity is drugs or alcohol related. You know, people do silly things when they're trying to pursue a habit, and I can tell you our drug task force, the Cannon River Drug and Violent Offender Task Force, has done a phenomenal job, though. I mean, you know, they've put a lot of pressure on folks that have been moving drugs in our area in Rice County, and I know they put several people behind bars, and they've also, I think, forced drug dealers to flee the Rice County area because they know the heat's on, and they're keeping an eye on them, and so that seems to be our biggest challenge is, you know, drugs get a hold of a community, and we want to continue to be proactive on that.
Now remember, we're a hop, skip, and a jump, almost literally, from the Twin Cities.
Oh, yeah.
Right off a major interstate.
Yeah, we've got stuff going up and down the freeway, and you know, I would be, you know, we've got stuff coming from other countries that's coming up I-35.
Yep.
And you know, we even deal with cartel drugs, and we want to be aggressive with those things. And our task force does a good job working with other agents across the state and even the feds. And you know, we want to keep the heat on. I know nobody's going to jump up and down and say we're winning the drug war. I mean, this is an ongoing fight, but we want to try to get as many people as we can into treatment programs and hold some of those high-level folks and the violent offenders accountable, and work to get them prosecuted.
It almost seems like anyway, that it's an unwinnable war, the war on drugs, much like the war in the Middle East is, you know, unwinnable.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that we win it. I think it's a multi-pronged approach. I can tell you, I was a drug task force commander for a large drug task force in the state of Minnesota before I came here, and one of the most rewarding calls I ever received was a young woman who we kicked her door down and put her in jail and put her kid in foster care, and she called me about 6 months later in tears and said best thing that ever happened was being put in the system, because I've been in treatment, I got my kid back, I got away from this guy that was very destructive for her, and she said my life is great. So you know, sometimes we look at law enforcement and think, well, they're just the brutes out there kicking the doors down, but the reality is, you know, there's a lot of successes out there too when you get people into the right programs.
Yeah, and those people, they don't have to want, they have to want to be in the program, they have to want to get out of the situation that they're in. You right?
Yes, and so, you know, sometimes it takes a rock bottom moment before people realize I got to do something, or my life's not gonna last very long.
Yeah, no question about that. So, no real special observances for National Police Week other than obviously the band around the badges, right?
We got the band around the badges. Our flags are at half-mast, and then we've got cookies and stuff flooding in our building, so that's not helping the cops' diets this week. A lot of wonderful families and spouses of law enforcement have dropped off treats.
You know, I was going to ask you, Andy, too. I had orthopedic and fracture clinic person in studio, one of the doctors, yesterday, and he touched on the fact that he sees a lot of law enforcement personnel in his practice. you guys have a workout regimen that's required for officers, or they
No,
do that all on their own?
we don't. I mean, obviously, we encourage officers to stay in a kind of shape because you get in a 2-minute tussle with somebody, and even the number one injury I've heard for law enforcement is shoulder injuries. So I myself have been up to rehab for hurting my shoulder. So you got to stay in a bit of shape so you're not hurting something when you do have to wrestle rock with somebody.
But is there a minimum physical requirement that you have to be an
No,
officer?
not for us. When you get hired on, you have to have an ability to pass certain things, and the doctors have to sign it off to make sure you're physically fit to work as an officer.
No, able to lift a couple 100 pounds, stuff like that?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks, Andy.
You bet, Gordy.
Appreciate your stopping in. It's always nice visiting with the Faribault Police Chief, Andy Bohlen. Busy, busy, busy. He's a busy guy, and we appreciate his taking time out of his day to be with us. Again, as I mentioned, next week John Dvorak joins us on Tuesday, so I see I have to find a guest for Victoria Day in Canada on Monday. Maybe we can get a Canadian Prime Minister on or something like that. That will conclude today's edition of AM Minnesota on KDHL AM in Faribault, Minnesota.